Um, but yeah, welcome everybody, and thank you all for wanting to be on this session. Yeah, like I said, we've had a really good response for today and tomorrow. We've had 65 people sign up across both sessions, so hopefully we'll get more than 13 at the moment. But yeah, we've had a really good response to that. And I know some of you here today, but I'm Jemima Morris. I work for British Equestrian. I've been working for British Equestrian for about 4 years now, but over the last sort of 10 years, I've been working with various charities and CICs to help them bring in funding, mainly for sport for good, so sport to improve mental health or sport for disabled young people, and really with a focus on applying to trusts and foundations and the lottery, those sort of funding pots. So that is the focus today, is looking at those trusts and foundations and how to find funding. When we put this out there, we did ask everybody when they registered to sort of give us an idea what they wanted to find out more about. And we said project ideas, how to find funding, and developing a funding application. The most popular two were the how to find funding and develop your application. There was a number who came back with project ideas as well. I think half of the people registered. So what I thought I'd do is do a little bit on project ideas to start with, and then spend more time on the other two. And just so that you know, I'm going to put my email address at the end. And obviously, if you've got whichever member body that you're affiliated to, who are there to talk about any project ideas as well. So heading just sort of straight in, obviously, I think everybody kind of thinks, oh, we need funding, well, we desperately need money to sustain our centres and to keep going, which totally understand everybody needs. But you do need to have a bit of a think through on what you're actually looking for funding towards. The majority of funders do tend to want a project. There are some out there that will cover core costs, running costs, overheads, those sort of uh, business kind of costs, but they're not the sort of majority. So on the whole, you need to think about what you need funding for. And I think where people can be quite clever as well is trying to wrap costs into it and thinking that side through, which we can come to. Obviously, it's whether it's a revenue project, so costs for staffing, coach costs, equipment, small items of equipment, um, helping training volunteers, those kind of things would all come under revenue costs. So just running sessions. Um, Capital project, obviously, if you've got your arena or your stables or something larger that you need developing, that would be a capital project. So just think those two in mind when we come to the how to find funding, because you'll be able to search for funding based on revenue costs or capital costs. So yeah, really thinking through what you need funding for. And if you are sort of really looking for more general kind of funding and trying to work something in, the majority of funders want to fund organizations who are working with more underrepresented groups, and that's underrepresented groups in sport, in equestrian, or just in general, those people who would benefit the most from going horse riding, being more active. So it's worth thinking about that and who's in your local area. Um, the other thing to really think about when you're looking at developing your project is this isn't just an equestrian project or a sport focused project. It's worth thinking about that wider role of physical activity and sport in health and well-being. So as we all know, the impact it has on mental health, improving someone's physical health, confidence levels, self-esteem, um, community connections, and strengthening that side. I'm going to come to this a bit later as well, but just to keep that in mind, that when you're looking for some funding, it's not just about a sport project. This is a much wider project. And I think a lot of funders and a lot of organisations know just how valuable sport is on all those other social value outcomes. Just to few more specifics on kind of ideas and how to think about your ideas is most funders want to know what the need is and what's happening in your local area. So kind of, you know, your area best. Think about what are the local issues in your community. I'm going to give you a few links later as well, but starting to think about the insight of your area, and you can look on various websites to look in more detail about health inequalities in your area, activity levels, and those kind of things to see what is going on around you. Because a lot of funders just want to know, right, what are you trying to achieve? What's the problem that you're trying to solve, kind of thing. So if you know, um, this next one, there's a lot of antisocial behaviour locally. It might be that your sport, maybe not as big for equestrian, but is used as a diversionary activity for children and young people. So starting to think about what's going on in your area and what might help that area and what's needed. Targeting areas in the top most deprived areas of the country. This is something that some funders put as a priority. And so if you are sitting in an area of deprivation or you've got pockets of deprivation near you, it's worth looking into that and finding that out before you do a funding search. It's not to say all funders have to be about the most deprived areas, but it's certainly something that a lot of funders want to see, or some do. Volunteering programs, that's something else that some funders would look at as well. So where you're developing skills of young people and adults, and potentially, I guess, that pathway into employment. But really, you know, the impact of volunteering on young people and the confidence and the skills development, thinking about those kind of things. It might be something that you need for that side on in your stables. Just to mention Sport England priority audiences. So these are the audiences that Sport England and the Active Lives research they've done say are the least active. And this is obviously proven by them. So you can always quote this as well. So there's a whole host of different audiences, of which the sort of main ones are the ones that have been for years, people living on low incomes. So picking those in the most deprived areas, disabled people or those with long-term health conditions, people from culturally diverse communities, and then girls aged 5 to 16 is also in there, which I know is obviously a big popularity for equestrians, so something to pick up. I won't read all those out, but those are all the audiences that Sport England have shown to be the least active. So if you're looking at projects targeting one of those audiences, you know there's a need to get one of those audiences more active. Just a couple of examples of a few projects that we know what successful. This is with Sport England particularly, but you know, it might be that it would be successful with other funders. The first one was about purchasing a taller horse to enable more disabled people to learn to ride. Had a higher weight bearing for that horse, and Sport England could very much see the link between purchasing this horse to getting more people active. And this actually helped reduce that charity's waiting list by benefiting 90 people. So they were really able to show we've got the need here, we've got X number of people on our waiting list, and purchasing this horse will allow them to be more active and come into our stables. So thinking like that is quite important. The next one was about horse riding sessions for young immigrants from culturally diverse communities, also people on low incomes. And again, this was weekly sessions, this one for 44 weeks over 11 months. So those are sort of two slightly different ones, aimed at disabled people. The other one is young immigrants from culturally diverse communities. And this next one I thought was quite interesting. This was a horse riding and pony management course for siblings of disabled children. So again, not necessarily the main target audience, but siblings, so who they may be classed as carers as well. And this was 6-week courses, 8 children for 6 weeks, doing horse riding and pony care. So those are a couple of ideas, and the funding for this one, it was for pony hire, instructor fees, support workers, wrapped a lot of things into that budget that they did for that one. But that's just a few kind of ideas. I know a lot of people have ideas already, but again, if this is something you want more detail on, or you want to discuss it with myself or your member body, please drop us a line afterwards and we can talk through specifically your actual ideas. And obviously, once you've got your idea, it's then thinking about where you can find funding, which I've kind of put this picture on because it can be a bit daunting and a bit confusing to work out where do we start looking for funding from. But actually, I'm going to give you some tools now, and some free tools that can really help you to start looking for funding. Once you've got these clear ideas on what you're looking for funding for, there's some really good tools out there. So the first one to mention, and I will send this presentation through afterwards, is called Get Grants. And if I were you, I would sign up to their free newsletter straight away. And what they do, I think it's once a month, maybe, you just get a newsletter with 25 kind of funding deadlines that are coming up. And it's just quite useful just to click into some of those funders and see if they align with your organization. The other thing with Get Grants is you can search by these boxes there. So if you're looking for a capital project, you can just click and search on capital, children and young people, disability, and you can search that way. So this is one to have a look at. It's free. It's not always the most up to date, I don't find, but it's worth having a quick look for something free. But definitely sign up to that newsletter. The next one is Charity Excellence Framework. Again, it's a free search tool. I know everyone here isn't a charity, so you may not be able to take advantage of this one. But if you are a charity, you can go on, put a few details in there. Again, it's another one who send through a newsletter, but you can go on, search, put your location, put the people and groups you're working with, look how much you're looking for, the categories, and then do a search. This one, if I'm honest, I find quite overwhelming at times. There is so much on there. But again, if you've got the time, it's worth having a little look because it's another free tool. Have a search and you'll see a host of different trusts and foundations will come up. This is the one I like the best. It's called My Funding Central. The only thing with this one is it's free if you're an organisation with an income threshold of £30,000. If you're above that, you are supposed to pay. Whether you can get around this, I shouldn't probably say this, but I actually sit on the committee at a very small tennis club. So I've managed to register for it based on my tennis club. So if you have something else you can register it based on, then I think this is a really good one. And again, you can search via locations, the type of work you're doing. It comes up with volunteering, employment, disability, health, and you can do a really good search on that. The good thing with this one is the locations, though, because I think it's really important to do a national search as well as local searches, and I'll come to that in a bit. So that's 3 tools there. The other one, which again is free but is quite time consuming, is Charity Commission. So you don't have to register on this or anything, but you can do a search on the Charity Commission website by clicking advanced search, and you can look at what the charity does, who the charity helps. But the key is this bottom bit that says makes grants to organizations. So you can click on all these areas. Definitely make sure you click on makes grants to organizations, and then you can pull up a huge list of trusts and foundations. If you do have the time and energy to do this one, it will actually pull off hundreds and hundreds, or even thousands it could be. So you need to be very specific as you can be with your advanced search. But again, it's worth doing it. And when you do, if you are going to do this one, what I would suggest is when you have an opportunity to say the expenditure level or income level of that foundation. So often I think there's no point looking at a foundation that's only giving away £5,000 a year. You should put higher for that foundation on how much they expend each year. Hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, that's quite useful as well. Then there's a few I've just pulled out, which are ones you have to pay for, which personally I don't think you need to do. I've tried the Directory of Social Change 1 year and I didn't find it any better than any of the other free tools, but that was £500 for the year. So unless you're very, very flush with money, I probably wouldn't go down this route. There is another one though, which is the one I mentioned, My Funding Central, which I think is brilliant. If you are a bigger organization with a much higher income level, then they charge that out at quite a high amount. And the other one, which could be worth going on though, it's only £15 a year, is called Grin, and they send you a daily grants database, which is quite useful. Every day, the organizer, one of the charities I work for, have just signed up for it, and every day I'm just getting a few grants on there. Maybe worth the £15. See how you go with the free tools first. The other thing now I think is really good is if anyone's on LinkedIn, or I would get on LinkedIn maybe if you're not, there are various posts like this. This is the one that I use called the Daily Fundraiser. And every day they just pop the latest kind of or a foundation on there, which has a closing date coming up soon. And you can just have a quick look at it or see straight away it's not right for you. This one actually is quite interesting when I did the screenshot, because actually it might be relevant to some people here. The Screwfix Foundation, they do capital grants of up to £5,000 for charities and CICs to improve properties and community facilities for people in need. So again, if you were looking at a funder like that, it's worth you'd focus on the audience that you're helping. So if you are working with disabled people or people with mental health issues or neurodiverse young people, then you'd be able to sort of apply for something like that and wrap a capital project in there. But that's just an example of the daily fundraiser in LinkedIn. There are loads of others like this in LinkedIn that once you sign up to one, you'll be able to see who the others are. But again, I think that is worth doing. And then there's also a host of kind of AI tools. So depending on where you want to go, how advanced you want to take this, you could sign up for one of these. So the one that I've signed up to about a month ago is Funding AI, which has various levels on it that you can do. So what I've signed up to is a very basic free weekly list of funders that comes into the inbox. I had to put a bit of detail in there so that they could match funds to the kind of organization that I'm working for, which is why it's a sport organization. So the first two it threw out was Sport England Movement Fund and another one for sport called Boost. I think that is really worth doing the free version. What they then try and sell you, but they're not hard selling you, is actually some of these AI tools now will do more than just give you the funders. They'll actually write the application for you, and you put your details, as much information on there, but you have to pay for that side of it. But I think it's quite a good one to just sign up for the free one if you want to keep just signing up for a number of free versions. Local giving, you have to pay a very small amount for this. I haven't used it recently, but they've also got a find grants tool. Some of you may already be part of local giving. It doesn't cost very much to be part of it, but they've also now developed an AI tool which can help. You can write the application through the tool. So it's incredibly clever now how this can work. I haven't used this last one, but I've heard about it. It's called Grant Genie AI. So that's another AI tool. I mean, this is a whole different area, a whole new area. So if you're very new to funding and find funding, if you're going to use one of these, I would just pop on that top one, Funding AI, and do the free tool that gives you the funders and see how you go. But this might be something we look at a later date if people are interested, because it is a bit mind-blowing, the AI tool side of it. And then once you've had a bit of a look, I would definitely do a list of national funders and also local funders. I think for where your type of organizations, which are very much part of a local community, the local funders are really a good one to look at. These are three places you can go to look for funding as well. So the Active Partnerships Network, I don't know if many of you already signed up to them, but they're kind of part of Sport England. They're funded by Sport England, and they're all about tackling inequalities in sport and who are getting those people who are least active to be more active. If you go on if you go on that link that I will send through the Active Partnership Network, you can find your local partnership, and most of them have a find a funder. And it's another free funding tool you can have a look at. They will also possibly send out different grants that come up. So again, another one to sign up to their newsletter. So the one, they're called something different everywhere. In Berkshire, it's called Get Berkshire Active. In Devon, it's called Active Devon. And in London, it's London Sport. So it's a bit confusing, but you'll find your area on that link. The other place to look is your local voluntary services. So again, you may already be sort of signed up to this, but they're there as an infrastructure support organization to help charities, CICs develop and become more sustainable.
Oh,
Oh, are you happy to put yourself on mute? Thank you. Um, and they are I've just picked one there called Slough CVS, Slough Council for Voluntary Services. There's one in each area, and they have various funding pots as well as able to support you with funding applications. The example I'm giving now, I just gave Slough because they actually had a pot called One Slough, which the charity I work for has got between 5 and 10K a year for about 8 years. So you never know what your local voluntary services may have. And the same on the community foundations. Again, this is a body which is in every area. Each area has a community foundation and they distribute funding. Not huge pots on the whole, they tend to be 5, 10K. But again, if you're in your local area, it is worth getting in touch with your community foundation, get on their newsletter and see what funding pots they've got out there. I mean, it can be obviously time consuming all this, but it's worth putting in the time at the start and start to see what's out there in your area. And then, like I said, I would keep a list. I always keep a list of all the relevant funders, a national list and a local list. And we've got a list already of national funders. Just pull it up on the British Equestrian website in the sort of funding section. This is just an example of how I like to keep things. So keeping the funder, how much they'll fund, link to their website, and then the notes, so that you're not you build this database before you actually apply. That's how I always do it. Put them down, get them in a spreadsheet, and then come back to them to look at in a lot more detail. But you'll feel free to download from our website as a starting point on some of these national funders. This next sheet is one I actually did for an equestrian centre up in Yorkshire. And this is much more local funders, as you can see. Some of these local funders, like the bottom two, there's no website even, but something might resonate with them. I think they're worth looking at, those smaller trusts. So there's one there called the Norman B Charitable Trust, up to 10K. No application process. These sort of trusts want to fund more local organisations like yours. So I think it's worth putting the time into some of these local trusts as well. Yeah, so that's just an example of a Yorkshire one, but that's what I would do if I were you, a national sheet and a more local sheet. And then you do need to have obviously basic requirements that every funder is really looking for. So you have to have a governing document, so either a constitution or a memorandum of association understanding, a board or management committee of at least three unrelated people. These are the general things most funders want. And then obviously have a bank account in the name of the group that has two unrelated signatories. These are the kind of standard things most funders want. So it's making sure you've got this in place before you launch into anything. When you're looking for finding the funding as well, once you've sort of found some funders that fit with you, check the eligibility criteria on the governance. So obviously we've already said that you need to be a not-for-profit governance structure. There are a lot of funders who will only fund charities. So if you're a CIC, make sure you double check that first. There is no point applying to a trust or foundation that says they'll only fund a charity if you're a CIC. Then have a look at the income level as well, because there are funders who'll say they'll only fund organizations with a income of under 250k, over 1 million, under 150. A lot of them specify that, so have a look for that. You have to sometimes dig into the guidelines to find that out. And some will also specify level of reserves. That tends to be the bigger funders who do that. But again, just worth scanning to make sure through the guidelines, depending on what your reserves policy is, have a little look at that. So once you've got your list, then and you're going back and looking in some of these funders, then go through and read those guidelines really thoroughly so you're not going to waste any time. And making sure when you do that search that you find a funder that is interested in those same social objectives as your work. So, as we said, thinking through the outcomes of your work in terms of improving mental health, social connections, skills development, those kind of things. Think that through when you're doing your search. Because, as we said, if you just put in sport or horses, you won't get many funders coming up. You need to put in a wider social objectives than that. And then again, fairly obvious, but only apply for those funds that hit the criteria for your project and organisation. It's incredibly challenging out there. I don't want to dishearten anyone because it's worth doing it, but it is more challenging than I've seen in the last 10 years of working. I think AI has probably helped that because it does make it easier for people to do an application and do them quickly. Yeah, so I already mentioned, I don't know if everybody's seen the social value of equestrian report that's on the British Equestrian did last at the end of last year. I'm sure you all do your own impact as well, but if you don't have your own impact, then it's worth using the social value report so that you can show research shows that equestrian does improve mental physical health. It does improve mental health. I mentioned the individual development as well, and those strong community bonds. The research is there to show that uh, equestrian can achieve all this. So have a look as well on the British Equestrian website at that report to add in to build the case for your application. But yeah, just I thought I'd put those up there so that when you do your funding search, you keep that in mind as to what funders you can look at. Because actually, if there is one all about community connections and community development, you can show that your work can achieve that, if that makes sense. So hopefully that's helpful on finding funding and hasn't kind of bamboozled everyone too much. But yeah, there's some really good free tools out there. If I were you, I'd get on them straight away and get those free newsletters coming into your inbox. So once you've found the funder and you've got your list, most funders want to know some standard information. So what I always like to do before I launch into a funding application, but you don't have to do it this way, is just develop a document, 2 pages of A4 that goes through these areas. So brief overview of your organization, what your project is and what you want to deliver. Now, when you do your application, it's really important with this that you're very specific on it, that you literally go into the detail of 1 hour session, number of weeks of the year, number of people attending, the exact location, and describe it, I would say, as though the person reading it knows nothing at all. I think sometimes people like to put really big words in and kind of waffle around something like, yeah, whereas actually they want to know what are we going to fund. So be as simple as you can with that. Why your project is needed, I'm going to come to that because that's a really important part for funders. They want to know what the demand is and what the need is for your project. The outcomes and benefits, so what the impact of your work is. As we said, you could use the social value report as well as your own quotes and case studies. I'm sure you've got lots to show the impact you have on people. Project costs. So detailing what those costs are is important to do before you apply. How you're going to monitor and evaluate the project. Again, this doesn't have to be really, really complicated, but just making sure that you're hitting that funders um, what they want to achieve, that you might be doing a short survey after, before and after, or case studies and quotes. It doesn't have to be incredibly complicated, but it can be a mix of a few different measures. Sustainability, just having a little think about how you're going to sustain that project or how the people in your project are going to be able to continue horse riding or continue being active or where you're signposting them. And I think it'd be good to develop that into a brief document straight away for funders because some of the funders, as I mentioned, particularly those local trusts and foundations, won't have an application form. So once you've got this ready, you can actually send it to quite a few trusts and maybe just tailor it a tiny bit to them. When I first started working with a charity, I think it was in a number of years ago, I remember doing about 40 trusts and foundations that I found straight away that just had email addresses, and I sent them all the same document pretty much. And we did get the odd £1,000, £2,000 check actually they sent to the charity. Not a huge amount of money, but something that then you can go back next year and ask again. So it's worth doing that. And again, as I just mentioned, it's spending some time evidencing the need. Again, it can be quite time consuming. So I like to keep a page with national stats, local stats, your own consultations so that you can just pick them up for your future bids. So again, putting the time in at first. So in your area, what are the inactivity levels? You know, how active are young people and older people? And I can send you these links. I've got a document which I can send through afterwards with links to these websites to have a little look, putting in your postcode. Mental health stats in the area. Obesity levels, you know, do you have high childhood obesity levels at year 6 and I can't remember what other, it's reception, isn't it, that they're measured at. Are there a lack of physical activity opportunities in your area? Again, I think often when I've helped an equestrian centre, we've said, look, equestrian isn't the sort of sport people would necessarily all look to do, but it's something different. And being able to offer, particularly girls who aren't very active, a different kind of opportunity is really, really important. So thinking through those kind of things. Indices of multiple deprivation, as I've said, I know there's a lot of equestrian centres don't sit in a high area of deprivation, but it might be locally, you know, there's a pocket near you that you can pull out. So pulling some of this data out is really important as well as those stats, also just any anecdotal evidence that you have. So if families have been saying to you when you're out, you know, actually there's nothing for our young people to do, or our disabled child, there's no activity, those kind of things are useful as well that you can just include in an application. Families have told us, parents have told, you know, case studies, they're really good, and funders really like to see, not doesn't have to be pages, but just a short paragraph of a case study. You know, if you've had parents of kids who you know of the impact you've had on them, ask them to put something in writing to you. It's really important that, and quotes. Again, just asking people at the end of a session or some of your members who have been there years for quote on what impact it's had on them, horse riding. It doesn't have to be such a huge thing. If you want to go a bit further and do a little survey with members, then great as well, so that you can actually say 80% of members said they have improved mental health from riding with us for a year. Those kind of things are important to do, but they don't have to be big. They can just be 4 or 5 questions. And again, there are free tools you can use for doing a survey. It's worth it might be worth doing, or even just after a session if you've got people around to ask a few questions to. So spend a bit of time on that need, and once you've got the facts down, you've got them then for all those bids. Again, I've kind of said this, but really important, I think, to keep your language as simple and concise as possible, and keeping away from all those acronyms, or if you do have an acronym to use, make sure you explain it at first. But I think, even saying things like off horse activities, people who aren't in the sector might not have any idea what that means. So I think it's worth even just mentioning what the yard duties are, or what kind of off horse activities there might be, what a horse riding session might entail. If I know I think it was somebody I worked with said that they were only going to be horse riding for 30 minutes, but actually everything around that one, they're still maybe at your centre for an hour, being active or moving around. It's worth making sure you explain that simply. Using some of the funders' language, that's something I think is quite important to do. So if they're talking about building resilience of young people, then it's worth just referencing. Sorry, I've got referencing that, and looking at what the fund is trying to achieve and making sure you link your work to that fund. So if it is one that's all about improving mental health, then focus on that. If it's just about physical activity, then again, focusing on that. So thinking about what they want to achieve as well as what you need from it. And then the budget. I know can be quite difficult, I think, for equestrian centres, but making sure the budget is very accurate and links to the project detail. So where you've said we're going to run 40 weeks of sessions, an hour a week, it's really linking, well, what does that hour cost? What are the costs of the instructors? What are the cost of maybe some additional equipment we might need? You can put volunteers in there, like in-kind costs for volunteers that you have. You could add in coaching qualifications, but think through that. And I think the other bit that's hard maybe with your centres is, do you include in the hire of ponies, the hire of the venue if you own that venue? It's trying to wrap up those costs that are maybe more core costs, but wrapping them in a clever way, if that makes sense, but making sure that the budget is really clear. I have seen before some centres just putting their entire budget in. On the whole, a funder doesn't want to see that. Except some of those smaller trusts and foundations I mentioned, I think you can do it that way. So in your 2-pager, at the end of your 2-pager, you can say the cost to run our centre is £150,000 a year, and we are looking for funding towards keeping us going. Do you see what I mean? You can do that with some of those funders without an application form if it's not specifically a project. And then I've already mentioned about demonstrating the impact you have and how you know it will work. Again, I would reference now that social value report to show we know it works. This research has been done. There's other research as well, and I'm sure Steph from BHS has got a lot of research as well. So tap into what's out there as well. Um, Again, I've already mentioned about thinking through how you will measure and evaluate the project. I normally just put things like, we will do a brief survey, gather quotes and case studies to show the impact, because a funder likes to see afterwards what impact they've had. Also, always try and be clear on the number of people that you are going to be impacting on. If it's a very, very small amount for a lot of money, then you just need to think that through, because if you're trying to apply for £40,000, but you're only impacting on 5 or 6 people, a funder might think, well, that's not great value for money for us. So just think that kind of thing through as well. Whereas if you're only applying for £3,000, impacting on 6 people, they might be happier to look at that side of things. Partnership working. Now, this, when I mentioned like the local CVS and the active partnerships, this again is something that funders like to see, especially if it's an audience you're not normally working with. So if you say if you haven't worked with disabled young people before and that's who you're looking to reach out to, they'll want to know, well, how are you going to get to those young people? You know, are you working with various special needs schools, or is there another partner you could work with? It's worth thinking that through and having a few partners. You don't have to have hundreds, but just having some in the local community that you're working with who can really help you reach the audience you're looking to get to and come to your centre. AI tools, I've already sort of mentioned those other tools, but I don't know if anybody's delved into things like ChatGPT these days, but it really can help you save time and help with your application. What I would advise if you are going to use something like ChatGPT is put as much of your own detail and passion in there as possible, because I think funders can see through it. What I wouldn't do is just put in, this is the question from a funder. We're a horse riding stables. Give me the answer. I would put in a lot of detail about yourselves and get ChatGPT to maybe develop a good answer that you can then tailor. Or the other way I do it, I normally write my answer first and then put it in ChatGPT and say, can you make this sound a bit better for me? I think it's the way everyone's going, I think, and it would speed up your work. It could speed it up. So again, even with the two-pager, once you've done that two-pager, if you wanted to put some of it in ChatGPT, you can do. So just a few sort of final general tips. Again, as I already mentioned, don't spend a lot of time applying for a pot where you don't meet the criteria. It just isn't worth it. You know, if it's all about disadvantaged young people living in the most deprived areas and you're not doing any of that, I wouldn't apply. Stick to the word count. So a lot of these application forms, literally you only have 100 words or 200 words. Don't go over. Even if you're doing it in a Word document, just stick to that word count, because I think it's a way they can just say, no, we're not even going to look at that one. Again, I've already mentioned on the complex jargon, and even if they ask you for 100 words, but you can do it in 10, 20, 30, then, then it's worth just doing that. Keep it simple. And again, I wouldn't set up a project just to meet that funding priority. So when you're looking for funders and you see, oh, wow, that sounds like a really good, juicy pot of money, but if it's totally different to what you want to do, I wouldn't try and set something up new. And again, as I said before, don't apply if you haven't got the right governance structure. They will just reject it straight away. And the same on those income thresholds. Really do that research to make sure that you fit that funder. And then just a couple of other things. I know this is a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but if you want some more information, we did run a couple of years ago two bid writing workshops that went into a lot more detail on all those areas that I've just spoken about. So if you want more information, when I send this through, you'll have the links to be able to listen to. I think they're about a couple of hours each. So if you want to have a look at them, you can do. So yeah, so kind of that was really a whistle stop tour on funding advice. I'll stop sharing my stream now, but and see if there's